Welcome to another session of Just Me podcast. And today we are joined by the wonderful maritime genius, which is Stephen Jones. So, Stephen, who are you and what is it that you do?
Hello, Sid. Hi. Wonderful and genius in one sense. I've never actually been introduced as that before. So, wow, that's quite a start. I mean, I'd like to pretend that those are both accurate, but I'll probably dip into the truth a bit and we can decide for ourselves. I'm a maritime person. I was at sea myself for a number of years. I'm from a very long line of seafarers in the merchant navy. And I work across a range of different kinds of projects, everything from looking at seafarers' well-being and their happiness at sea, through to the kind of darker elements of the world through maritime security,
Wow.
anti-piracy, counter-terrorism, all those weird and wonderful side of things. So I kind of counter the light with the shade.
Wow. And how, I mean, when you say a long line, because it is a long line, isn't it? So how
It
many
is.
generations does it go back?
Well, I'd always kind of flippantly said about 8 when
Wow.
kind of whenever anyone asked. But then, as I think as most people did during COVID, I probably went down too many ancestry.com rabbit holes and was pulling out all kinds of familial links to the maritime industry, to actually being on ships, through to the fishing industry as well. A lot of family from Cornwall involved in pilchard fishing. And then when the pilchards dried up, no culinary pun intended, then they all moved up to Liverpool. So a lot of Cornish fishermen actually ended up as seafarers in Liverpool, which probably kind of coincided really with the boom in sailing ships going out from Liverpool over to the Americas and the Caribbean, etc. So they run deep and in various strange and weird ways. So I think 8 seems like you're pushing your luck if you say more than that, but I imagine it's probably a lot more.
Wow. And in terms of, and did you find that when you were younger, is that just something you wanted to do in terms of get into the maritime, industry? Because it's not the type of thing you wake up one morning and go, well, I'm just going to go off to sea and join the Navy and whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and possibly similar to yourself, I used to wake up and wonder where my dad was, and inevitably he was out at sea. So it kind of tied in with, the reality of my life was always tied up with the sea because either my father was away or he was home from the sea, and the different
Right.
dimensions to that as well. So, it was always the kind of natural path and progression, really. I actually sailed on a couple of my dad's ships when I was little. So, aged 6, I headed out from Liverpool over to the Caribbean on
Wow.
Harrison's vessel called the Astronomer. And it kind of, even at that young age, I seemed to soak up so much of it. I can remember vividly so many things about it. And I guess that really kind of lit an enthusiasm for the world and seeing it from
Wow.
a ship.
Wow. Wow. And in terms of, I mean, so how many ships have you been abroad? And when did it start? So, I mean, you were born, Liverpool area,
I was born in Birkenhead,
right?
um, as a lot of ships were born in Birkenhead as well because of
Right.
Camel Head. But yeah, born in Birkenhead and then kind of was early schooling around the Wirral in Bebington. And then, as a lot of people did in the kind of late 70s, early 80s, moved out to North Wales, so a place called Buckley, which near Mold, and then went to school there, so high school there. And then was I mean, I nearly managed to not be a seafarer by being so bad at school and failing all my GCSEs. So nothing was ever guaranteed at any point when I limped back home with my 3 grade C GCSEs instead of the 5 that I needed to not a terribly good reception. But yeah, so that was the kind of the kind of academic journey, if you could call it that, to that point of like, well, okay, you can be a cadet and go away to sea.
Wow. And then in terms of, so from school, what did you then do? Did you then go for an interview or, how did you get into maritime?
Yeah, I had a couple of interviews. Initially, I was offered a cadetship, and I was quite enthused by it until they sent me some photos of the ships that I was going to be on, and it was actually wood and pulp carriers coming from Finland into the UK, and all the photos were literally, it looked like the Russian Arctic convoys with ice covering all the ships, and I remember saying to my friends one evening, like, I just don't think it's me. I just don't think that the icicles and all the rest of it. So I had a rethink. I didn't bother with those. Eventually, ended up on bulk carriers, working for a company called Greig, who are in Cardiff, um, and did a few trips on the cadetship with them. Came to do my college phases down in Warsash near Southampton, and managed to snap my leg into playing football for the college, and they told me that I couldn't be employed anymore because I couldn't go up the stairs into college. So if I would vanish for a bit and I could come back when my leg was healed, which it was actually through their ship management company, not from Greg's. Greg's weren't horrible to my face. Um, they they then kind of turfed me out, and I was like, well, I doubt I'll go back to them because why would you?
Mm.
And then, fortunately, my father was working for a company called Cable and Wireless at that
Wow.
time, and they were just taking on some cadets for the first time for a few years. And I was managed to get into the frame, had an interview there, and it just all fell into place.
Wow. And in terms of how many years have you been, were you at sea?
Yeah, I was at sea basically for about 12 years.
Wow.
So started off, I joined my first ship on October the 13th, 1990, which was a
Wow.
Saturday, and in Gravesend.
Wow.
The tax got picked up from the railway station by a taxi, and as the taxi turned into the dock gate, the taxi driver kind of got a glimpse of the ship slightly before I did, and he turned to me and apologised. So I knew I was probably in trouble at that point. So this poor old bulk carrier had come all its way up from Townsville in Australia to London, and it's a long trip, and it looked like it had been through a long trip, and
Wow.
so kind of all my love boat misapprehensions about what I was heading into, my illusions were shattered at that point. So 12 years basically. Um, Towards the end of that, I'd actually come ashore to do a degree at Liverpool John Moores University. So I was kind of going away to sea while also doing the degree at that point, while I was kind of planning really to probably make my move ashore into a career.
Wow. And what have you learnt along the way then out of that, all those 12 years and plus many more?
Yeah, yeah. So from that 12 years, I then kind of went into various different maritime roles throughout the industry. Um, Always really, thankfully, with the actual fact that I was a merchant navy officer as being the kind of foundation,
Mm.
both in terms of getting jobs, but equally, being able to perform, understanding things, and probably the person that it shaped me ultimately to be. And some of that is all right, I think. Um, yeah, it's been kind of a road of discovery constantly. I think I don't know. I mean, there's so many different lessons that are learned, and they're different types of lessons. I guess one thing is that it's good to plan, but that plans, don't often survive contact with reality.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And who and what has sort of helped you along the way? I mean, who's been significant in your life?
Um, I've been very fortunate. I had a very supportive family. My dad was an inspiration, but with him being away at sea,
Mm.
I used to go and live with my grandparents when he was away at sea. So certainly my grandmother and grandfather. My grandfather had been at sea as well. He was an
Wow.
engineer. My grandmother had actually been a wren during the
Wow.
Battle of the Atlantic.
Wow.
So they were incredibly strong, wise, kind of noble spirits that guided me so much, and really did, rescue me when I needed rescuing, but equally set me off on a path when I needed to discover things for myself.
Oh, lovely. That's so lovely. So, what do you think the obstacles that have hindered you kind of along the way, and how have you kind of overcome those? Because I mean, leaving school with kind of three O
Yeah,
levels, three GCSEs, too short of what you needed to. But then you mentioned you then did a degree, so there's
yeah.
obviously some kind of leap between not having those qualifications and getting them.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of I joke that I've got more degrees now than I got GCSEs,
Is that right?
and I do because I've got two master's degrees,
Wow,
my bachelor's degree, but it
wow.
was yeah. I think I have a wonderfully naive, charming way of the penny not really dropping at the point it's meant to,
Got
but
you.
then it suddenly does, and then everything seems to fall into place. So I think growing up, I never really understood what it was all about. Why am I going to this place, and why are they making me read this book, or why am I doing? It just never really kind of drew, you know, between the dots of where it was all actually heading to, and you do it for this, and it's meant to take you there, and so that was a kind of, I guess, leaving school at 16, not with what I needed, being pretty much persona non grata at home, was a really rude awakening for me of like, oh no, it's meant to be like this, and now I'm goosed.
Yeah. Wow. And in terms of, so what keeps you going, when things get tough? Because I mean, people often see, don't they, being aboard ship
Yeah,
is being very romantic and traveling around the world, which you have done. But it's tough, isn't it? I mean, it is
yeah,
isolating all of the things that you've encountered in your life. So what keeps you going when things get tough?
it is. I mean, it's very hard, if not impossible, to fully explain to someone who hasn't done it, who hasn't been on a ship, who hasn't been, thousands of miles away from home, maybe thousands of miles away from every other person on the planet in the middle of the sea. There are, as you say, beautifully romantic elements of that. But equally, there is a kind of robust resilience that you kind of
Mm.
have to develop. And that's what comes. And even if you manage to build these incredibly thick veneers of coping, they can be tested constantly. So I think the challenges are manifest in everyone's life and throughout everything we do day to day. I think the being away at sea definitely taught me so much. I think it shaped many of my responses. It did make me able to cope with certain situations that I perhaps wouldn't have ever been prepared for. I actually developed a kind of pride in that. I was a merchant navy officer, and I could navigate, and I could take control of these giant ships, and I could do these wonderful things. So being able to do that, well, surely I must have the confidence to deal with XYZ when you're challenged with it in other ways, because I am that person that can do these things, so of course I can do that. It doesn't always work out that way, and you can get some rude awakenings, but I think it gave me that kind of psychological
Mm.
foundation, if you like. Reality, as I said, will always test you and it'll always find your weak points, but having that foundation has always been very positive for me.
That's so brilliant. And in terms of, if you could go back to kind of young Stephen at the age of, I don't know, maybe 12, 13, what advice would you have given yourself, then?
um it's something that I probably naturally do now that I didn't do then. It's almost kind of about reverse engineering a solution.
Wow,
So
brilliant,
understanding what the end point is that you're
brilliant.
trying to get to, and then kind of being able to strip everything else away and understand those building blocks. So at 12, 13, the idea of being 16, 17 and doing GCSEs and all the rest of it just seemed so far away from me, from reality, from anything, that I just couldn't see that was the path.
Mm.
So, if I'd have been able to step back slightly and say, right, well, I've got to do that. And to do that, I need to know about this, and I need to laugh at the right parts of Macbeth, or be able to work out, what a transistor does, etc., then I think I would have been able to do it. Um, I think as well, it's one of those things that maybe hopefully I would be able to tell myself that maybe I wasn't quite as bad at schoolwork as perhaps I felt, because I looked back on some old school books a few months back, having a bit of a clear out. And I thought, oh, some of this is quite good. Whereas at the time, the the teachers didn't seem to agree. But there you go.
But it's amazing, isn't it? Because it's getting those qualifications is the
Yeah,
measure of your success at school.
yeah,
When in actual fact, the things that you talked about there in terms of robustness and resilience and all of those things that have really made you the person that you are today
yeah,
and not the things that we learn from books. It's interesting, isn't it? And you also mentioned about kind of joining the dots and retrospectively kind of looking back.
yeah,
So, what advice would you give to others now? Because I know you do a lot of work with a happiness index, don't you, in terms of the maritime, you know,
yeah.
industry, and which is brilliant, absolutely fantastic. But
Thank
what
you.
advice do you give to others now?
Yeah, so the Seafarers Happiness Index, which I kind of founded and I now work with the Mission to Seafarers on, is basically asking seafarers globally how they feel about some key aspects of life at sea. And then we kind of crunch all the numbers and listen to
Mm,
the stories that they tell us, and we're able to communicate to the industry about what
mm,
is going on. Um, I think being able to capture those realities, to be able to tell a story, whether it's someone else's story, which is, I hope a skill and an art as well as a science that I've kind of looked to do, but equally being able to understand your own story and where you sit in the whole kind of narrative arc of life. What do you want to be? How do you shape yourself? How do you make yourself that hero if that's what you want to be? And how do you achieve all the things that you'd like to be set out in front of you? And it's, the advice I would give is to have that sit down, have that, look in the mirror, talk to yourself, and really try and find what you think will make you happy, what you think success will feel like. What are the kind of boundaries? Do you want to go bouncing around the world's oceans, or do you want to,
mm.
be painting or whatever else, writing, finding your right path? One of the problems I think I'd probably had in growing up and why I was so bad at school is that being from quite an engineering focused family, there was always that kind of expectation that it was always going to be maths, physics, chemistry,
Yes,
etc., where I just didn't necessarily feel that was me. So I kind of struggled as well, maybe not enjoying those aspects of learning because I didn't feel I was learning the right things. So it's about being honest to yourself as well and trying to really make the most of your skills, your talents, and interests.
that's really lovely. I love that. Being honest, it's really nice. And give us an idea, Stephen. How big is the maritime? Because I know when we met, quite a few months ago,
Yeah.
you told me how big the maritime industry is for offshore, workers. How big is it?
Yeah, I mean, the maritime industry is a strange one. It encompasses so many different things, so it almost becomes impossible to kind of pinpoint. Some people who maybe say they are in maritime, you'd perhaps think they aren't, and equally, the other way, people who think they're not are. But working our way back, there's probably somewhere in the region of, I estimated last time I looked, probably about 1.5, 1.6 million seafarers
Wow,
globally
wow,
across a fleet of probably around 100,000 ships of kind of noticeable size that you would look at and you think, oh, that's a ship. Whereas you look at it and think, oh, that's a boat. So, 1.6 million across 100 and odd thousand significant vessels doing work around the globe.
it's amazing, isn't it? And in terms of, because we talked about the kind of the onshore support staff. I
Yeah.
mean, and roughly how many people support those 1.45 million people?
I honestly couldn't say, and I would distrust anyone that said that they could say it because there's really no one size fits all. You've got huge companies, the likes of Maersk, CMA, CGM, MSC, the real kind of titans of particularly container ships, and they have immense kind of management and operational staff around the globe, into the thousands. You've got other smaller companies.
Mm.
It's a lot of people doing a lot of things. And then, any touch point from a ship coming into a port, you can extrapolate out. So you're not just got their kind of corporate kind of beast with the people in there. You've got the port, or how many people work there. You've got whether it's trucks taking things away. You've got insurance. You've got port agents. You've got brokers. You've got all the banks. You've got the commercial. So the people with the touch points on a particular ship kind
Mm.
of almost grow exponentially as everyone touches all the other aspects. So it's a vast industry, but of course, to many people, it's a pretty much an invisible one, or certainly not very considered, and certainly not in the public eye.
Yeah, I mean, because when you start thinking about it, it's the food, it's all of them. I mean, yes, the actual cargo, the freight, or whatever that is, passengers or things, goods. But then, as when we spoke a few weeks ago, it's all of it's the food, it's the office work, it's the
Yeah,
bookings, it's the taxis. I mean, it's vast, isn't it?
it
Because
is.
I mean, was it 75% of our planet is water?
That's right. Yeah, it's a wet place, and and no one puts things onto a ship to move them just because they feel like it. It's
That's right.
because it's important. And it's important because, as you say, it's the food, it's the fuel, it's the raw materials, it's the finished goods going the other direction. It's all of the things that we all earn our livelihoods from, or we all sit on, or we all eat, or we all, everything is so dependent on shipping. And a vast amount of everything that we do ultimately depends on shipping, through
Mm.
to even the likes of data and the internet and the way that we consume content, or are linked together. Everything, the submarine cables, they
Yeah.
do the heavy lifting of all the data around the world, not the satellites. And I used to work on cable ships, so that was my bread and butter, was laying cables or repairing them under the sea. So everything depends on seafarers, and I think that was one of the things that really the industry rallied around during
Mm.
COVID, was the fact that seafarers, as much as anyone else, are key workers, but they're not actually usually seen in that way. It's an invisible industry with an even more invisible workforce.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. And in terms of your legacy, what would you like to leave behind? I mean, the Seafarers Happiness Index, I think, is fantastic. I mean,
Thank
it's
you.
such it's a great insight, as you say, to what is almost not an unforgotten, but it's almost a hidden industry, isn't it? And it's massive. I mean, 1.45 million, and I'm sure you could add another million, if not more, to the support staff.
Oh
Um,
yeah, definitely, definitely.
so
I
what
mean,
legacy would you like to leave?
yeah, I mean, I don't know, and I think that's one of the things that keeps you going. I think,
Mm.
if I had too certain a vision of what I wanted to achieve, then I would probably put myself on too rigid a path and be focused too much on it. I think one of the things that I've been very fortunate to be in a position to do is to pursue passions, interests, and to rise to challenges.
Mm.
So, I write a lot. So I'm just in the process of doing a book on maritime security for the Nautical Institute, which I hope will end up on the bookshelves of every ship, or in offices ashore. And that when people ponder their security, whether it's dealing with piracy, terrorists, or whatever, then they look to those words, and hopefully they'll find the answers that they need within them. The happiness index, hopefully being that voice of people out at sea, to make life better at sea, because I'm a strong believer that if you enjoy work, if you have the right circumstances and situation to enjoy, then you will excel. And that's really a message that I shout loud and clear across the industry. So those things, being a facilitator, really create some things, bring people together, make connections, hopefully provide some useful thoughts and guide people on their own kind of journey to learning about things, and enthuse them as much as I've been enthused by others.
That's really lovely. And what do you see as the magic that you bring in yourself to others? Where's that wonderful spark? Because it's like when you talk about the maritime industry and your years in the industry, you love it, don't you? I mean, you
I
do,
do.
and you want to support people to find that journey and to enjoy that journey.
Yeah, I do, and I think maybe that I don't think anyone should really either be aware of their own magic or certainly talk about what they think it is, because I think there's no quicker way to make the rainbow vanish than to point at it. So it's a
Mm.
difficult one to say. I what I hope I bring is passion, enthusiasm, and a desire to bring people together or to bring solutions and ideas to the fore. And that I hope and I try pretty much every day to do that in some way, form, or another.
That's really lovely. And we've got a great saying at me, which we call our fizzy pop moment. And when you're doing something you really like, whether you call it your flow or whatever it is. So where do you find your fizzy pop moments? I know you're a supporter of Liverpool, and obviously if
I
they're to
am.
win the league, obviously partly would be that. But where do you find your fizzy pop?
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you mentioned fizzy pop because I have a very immature palate and I didn't actually start drinking until I was very late in life. So I was teetotal until I was 28, and I
Wow.
discovered this sparkling perry from Asda, which I termed fizzy pop, and it was so that my fizzy pop moment is genuinely fizzy pop. But
Brilliant.
with regards to kind of celebratory shaking the bottle, spraying excitement and wonderment everywhere, um, I think again it's when you see that you've done good things. So I'm involved in something called the Propeller Club in Liverpool, which is a maritime networking, and we have an event every first Thursday of the month in Liverpool, and it brings people together from all diverse backgrounds, but all working in the maritime industry. And there are occasions in those events when you kind of you step away and go and get a drink or whatever, and you look around the room and you see lots of different types of people talking together,
Yeah,
invariably laughing, engaging with each other. The young learning from the old learning from the young, making each other laugh, finding business opportunities together. And I think that's really, it's times like that when you think, wow, you know, good job.
that's really lovely. And if you were to use one word to describe yourself, what would that be, Stephen?
um, gosh, one word: trying.
Brilliant.
And you can decide whether that's good trying or bad trying.
That's really lovely. And what's the rest of the week look like for you?
Well,
Have you
this
got
evening I'm off to the Athenaeum in Liverpool to deliver the second of the Battle of the Atlantic
brilliant?
commemoration lectures. So, actually talking about seafarers and cables under the sea.
Wow.
So, I am a one-trick pony, but yeah, we're looking at the kind of the wider issues of what the Battle of the Atlantic did, not only to enable us to win the war, which was pivotal, but for us to move into peace as well, and the kind of knock-on implications of what that left us with. So telegraph cables, as they were then, were hugely important in the war effort, not least us cutting the German and Italian cables, but equally keeping our own together. So I'm going to be running through the kind of the history of some of that, but equally
Wow.
where it's left us in the world today with the use of data and cables and the potential kind of strategic geopolitical concerns as other nations maybe don't want us to have the cables that we do. So hopefully an interesting evening ahead.
Oh, lovely. Sounds fascinating. Stephen, thank you so much.
It's
Honestly,
a
really
pleasure.
lovely to hear your thoughts and your history as well. Really nice. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Sid. Thanks, everyone.